Do men need their own political party? Mike Buchanan has formed the Justice for Men and Boys Party, saying that men face too much discrimination in everything from healthcare to education. Is he right? Do men get a raw deal in modern society? Give us a call, 0500 909 693. We can speak to Mike now. Good evening to you, Mike.
Yes, good evening, Adrian.
Why do you think men need a political party?
Because both, all the mainstream parties are resolutely anti-male in their legislation, and they have been for at least 30 years. I'm not aware of a single piece of legislation which, if it favours either gender, favours men. It is legislation where it shows a gender bias is always pro-female.
So, Mike, I'm going to make you, just for the next 2 minutes, Prime Minister. I'm going to give you the chance to introduce 3 new laws to Parliament. What would you do?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd do would be to ban all women prospective parliamentary candidate shortlists. I'd also have the state recognise that over 40% of domestic abuse and violence is inflicted upon men, and yet the state provision of services and support for men is approaching, is virtually non-existent. I'd also have the government do a great deal more than it's doing currently to try and understand why the male suicide rate is 3.5 times that of women, and yet the state takes virtually no interest in that, or spends next to nothing on initiatives to try and reduce that, especially for disadvantaged men in midlife. The suicide rate, it's carnage, quite frankly.
At what point, Mike, in your life did you decide we need to set up a men and boys party? Did something happen? I spent about the last 12, until a month or two ago, I'd spent about 12 months running the Campaign for Merit in Business. Now, the Campaign for Merit in Business basically campaigns against the government's threat of legislated quotas for women on corporate boards. All the evidence shows very clearly, and we have it on our website, that when the proportion of women on corporate boards is artificially increased, corporate financial performance declines. It's absolutely black and white. All right, Mike, stay there then. I want to bring in Holly Combe, who writes for the feminist website, The F Word. Good evening to you, Holly.
Hi.
We poor men are discriminated against. If you allow women to run big companies on an equal basis with men, the whole thing falls apart.
Well, I think it's interesting that I think that one factor that could play a part is if a lot of those men in that role and in that company don't like having to work with women or don't want to, to have them there. I think that it would be interesting. I don't know where those stats come from, and obviously stats are much more interesting to look at if we can actually sort of go through them and look at the research and the origins. I'm not really one for sort of throwing stats out there, whether it's something I agree with or something I don't.
Let's talk about the ideas then. That's what's really important.
Well, the thing about positive discrimination, I'm often in two minds about it, because on the one hand, I think, well, society needs to change. Press groups, whether not just women, other groups as well, whether it's to do with race or sexuality or whatever, we need to have a more even playing field. But there is the problem that if you try to input that, people with privilege, whether that's white people or men or whatever, will tend to kick back against it. And as somebody in an oppressed group, and also someone who has privilege as well, I can sort of see both sides of this, is that if obviously I make every effort as somebody who does have privilege not to do that.
Which oppressed group are you a member of?
I'm a woman, so I don't have male privilege.
That's laughable.
Why is that laughable?
Because the reason, for example, that there are few women, let's say in Parliament or on major corporate boards, is perfectly well understood. And Catherine Hackim, a world-renowned sociologist, Catherine Hackim, in 2000 published a theory called preference theory, and her research showed that 4 in 7 British men of working age were work-centred, but only 1 in 7 British women. So the long and the short of it is that women want more balance in their lives. They want to spend more time with family and whatever else. And so it's quite ridiculous.
Do you not think that's because women? I mean, it is true that there is a sort of a knock-on effect for men that's quite negative in this, in that men who would like to stay at home and men who'd like more work-life balance do actually often get laughed at. Not all men, and it depends on the circles they move in and the career that they're in. Well, and I think women are better facilitated, perhaps, to be able to make that choice.
I've got to say that the people that I know, all the people I know who say they want a better work-life balance are women.
Well,
I mean, I've never known a woman say she wants a better work-life balance and means she wants more work.
Well, I've known both. I mean, I can think of women that I've known sort of whether in the public eye or women I've spoken to who would fit into either camp. I mean, there's lots of women, you're totally right, who do say they want more work-life balance and want to spend time at home. But there's plenty of women who want to get on in a career and would prioritise that. So I think it's difficult to generalise. I think that not all men are the same and not all women are the same.
Holly, let me ask you, Mike, wait there. I want to ask Holly about a point that you raised earlier, which is that over the last 3 decades, Holly, if any legislation has been focused at one gender or the other, in Mike's account of it, it's been exclusively centred on women. There has been no pro-male legislation over the last 3 decades.
No, that's because, and I mean, when talking to men's rights activists and having debates before, I mean, obviously sort of there's kind of broadly 3 categories it seems to come into. Like some men's rights activists I can find common ground with because they're talking about with
respect, Holly,
sure.
I'm not particularly interested in discussing men's rights activists.
Okay.
What about the point I made about the lack of legislation focused on men?
Well, that's because, what I was getting to was about the sort of the backdrop that we're working with. Now, obviously, different people have different ideas about patriarchy and how it works. But, you know, it's because we've had a tradition through history where men have been considered to be the leaders, where men are expected to be at the helm, to be the breadwinner. You know, because of that, women have been expected to be in men's shadows. So to actually readdress the balance, which, as I say, sometimes that may not be effective, you know, that's another debate. That's the reason why it's women-centred. That's why it's not men-centred. I mean, that seems self-explanatory to me.
Mike, you've set up a political party. Are you really going to stand in elections?
We're hoping to stand for at least 30. We're planning to stand in at least 30 constituencies in May 2015, and basically the top 30 Conservative marginals, which have majorities or had majorities in 2010 of between about 50 and about 1,600 votes. So I mean, we'd love to get an MP, but even if we attracted a few thousand votes, in each of those, then some Conservative heads will roll.
Mike Buchanan, very interesting. Thanks for joining us tonight. He's formed the Justice for Men and Boys. Many thanks also to Holly Combe, who writes for the F Word website. Over to you then. Do we need a men's political party? Are men victims of discrimination?